Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Welcome back. Well, sometimes here at Rebel News we feel like we're so in the weeds on stories that it's worth it to pull the camera back, as they say, to take a big picture view to see what's going on. And I think this article by Spencer Fernando does that job in a good manner, in a terrifying manner. The headline is "Canada No Longer Feels Like a Free Country." And you can see this at spencerfernando.com. And Spencer gives 4 recent developments in Canada that do, each one of them are troubling, but when you put them all together, you start to worry, are we losing our freedom? Police raiding the Grace Life Church in Alberta, the stay-at-home lockdown order in Ontario, the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court saying we have to take down, quote, hurtful words from the internet, and our own reporter in Montreal, Yankee Pollock, being repeatedly stopped and fined on the street just for doing journalism, even though he has an exemption. Joining us now via Skype from Winnipeg is Spencer Fernando, author of this article. Spencer, great to see you. You know what? Each one of these stories we're familiar with here at Rebel News. One of them, in fact, impacts our own reporter. But when you look at them all together, and this is just one week's news, this is a terrifying trend.
Yeah, it's quite concerning. And I think the thing that disturbs me the most is to see how many people cheer this on. I mean, you go on Twitter and you see people saying, oh, yeah, we need a full military lockdown. Oh, when they see, the church being shut down, this is great, punish them. There's a lot of people cheering this on. And so I think it's easy for us to just say, oh, the politicians, they're corrupt or they're not listening to people. But, there are a lot of people who agree with them and who are pushing them to do this. And I think that's kind of the deeper issue is, how have we become a country where this is acceptable?
I have a friend in Australia who asked me how any of this Grace Life Church stuff was possible. And I tried to answer for an Australian. It would be like if someone came down from Mars, let's say, and said, well, how do you explain this? And my attempt to explain it to her was that normally you have different institutions in the establishment that sort of are a bit of a check and balance on each other. You have the government, but you have the opposition. You have the media. You have law professors and law courts. You have NGOs. Like, you have all these different sources of power. But on these issues that you list, all these sources of power are working in harmony. They all agree. There's no major source of power in our democracy that's worried about lockdowns, that is worried about free speech, that's worried about heavy-handed policing, that's worried about churches being shut down. There's just no other power source. They're all in on this together. It's a terrifying feeling.
Yeah, I mean, look at the way much of the establishment media has covered all this. They basically go out and they look for, violators, people who are breaking the so-called rules. And then they try to go after those people. So they should be going after the government. They should be saying, what are you basing these rules on? Do your numbers line up? Why? Good example is Ontario. Why do you keep going back into lockdowns when Toronto's had one of the strictest lockdowns in North America, if not the strictest, and it's still not working, obviously? Mm-hmm. Why do you keep doing the same thing over and over again? But instead, it's just, no, we'll just try to ostracize and make an example out of anyone who doesn't follow the rules. And so that the adversarial nature of the media is being fully abandoned.
Yeah. Police brutality, to be honest with you, very, very candid here, it's not something I really paid attention to in my life. And I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't have cared about it. And if I had heard about it, I would have in the back of my mind thought, well, there must be another side of the story. Police don't really do that. But over the past year, I've seen so many videos of police, I'm going to call it brutality, very heavy-handed approaches to people who do trivial things like not wearing a mask or whatever. And then I see the police physically manhandling our own people. So perhaps I'm criticizing myself for not caring more in the past, Spencer. But I now say, well, where are all the liberals and the leftists who used to be, hair trigger calling out police brutality? They seem to be cheering police brutality. It's a weird dichotomy. I mean, the police have never been more under scrutiny if it deals with, let's say, Black Lives Matter. Like, their police are terrified to do anything, but against, this Grace Life Church or reporters or people not wearing masks, it's open season. And forget about the police for a second, but where's the ACLU types? Where are the civil liberty types? Where's the rein in the police types? That's what's so confusing. The left used to care about these things.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's a good point to mention that, the right has often not been, and I include myself in this as well, not been good on those issues, kind of like you mentioned, your own kind of thought process. And, I tweeted a while back and actually got a surprisingly good response. I said, I think a lot of people on the right are maybe now understanding how Indigenous people have felt, by heavy-handed government action, the government telling them how to live and what to do and kind of imposing on them. And so I think there is a bit of a, maybe you could say, convergence of viewpoints in some of those issues. But I think one of the issues is that, the kind of the values of our society are starting to fade away. And what I mean by that is the commitment to, defending people's freedom. And the idea that you defend freedom for people, regardless of whether you agree with it, right? It's not like, oh, I'm just going to defend freedom for people I agree with. I'm defending the concept of freedom, right? So if it's an Indigenous person or a Black person being mistreated by police, then that's wrong. If it's, anti-lockdown group or anti-mask group, whether you agree with them or not, if they're getting mistreated by police, or if it's just regular people, just trying to go about their lives, and journalists getting mistreated by police, all of that is supposed to be wrong. It's not about agreeing with the ideology of any one group, but believing that people should be, free and should be respected. And so I think that's the bigger issue. And, a lot of these groups, I think, they feel politicians have basically said, these are the kinds of people you can target. You can go after conservatives. You can go after people who oppose lockdowns and oppose government restrictions. They're kind of an easy target. And I think some police, of course, not all, there are many great police officers, but some kind of take that as a cue and say, well, I guess we don't have to treat this group quite as well, and we can get away with it because no one's going to hold us accountable.
Yeah. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.